Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I'm finally back home. The reason I haven't uploaded is because I was playing a little classical event in Panama City. I was actually planning on making recaps every day. I even took the microphone with me. I had everything set up, but at the end of the day, I didn't really find the time. It was 2 games a day, so didn't really manage to get those recaps in. But we're back home, and so in this video, I want to talk to you about the last tournament that I played, give you my conclusions, my thoughts on the event, and remember, in December, I'm going to be playing 2 strong open classical tournaments, international tournaments, one trip to Colombia, again, yes, we're going back to Colombia, and then another trip to the great country of Costa Rica. Both very strong tournaments, with Grandmasters, International Masters, huge, strong fields, so that will be very, very exciting. And so I decided to play this event, and we'll talk more detailed about this in a second, despite some recommendations that I got and some second thoughts myself about playing these kinds of tournaments where I'm the #1 seed by a big difference. One of the players dropped out. I was going to be the #2 seed. I ended up being #1. And the tournament in itself was great. The organization is good. The playing hall, everything, all credit to the organizers. But unfortunately, it wasn't that strong in terms of rated players. It was very strong in terms of the level. But in terms of the ratings, I was #1 by a lot. And this can lead to some unpleasant results. Let's just keep it at that, give you a little spoiler, but we'll talk about that more in a second. So let's jump right into the first game. I'm playing Sebastian Ibanez with the white pieces. I'm going to try not to go into too much detail, but still some to make it interesting. Game #1, Sebastian Ibanez, pretty good friend of mine. I've traveled to him before to the 2022 Under-16 World Chess Olympiad. I know him pretty well. And I play knight c3, so already not going into the Catalan once again. I'm trying to expand my opening repertoire. And my opponent plays the Rogozin. And here, I was feeling a little bit stuck with my thoughts, and the reason for that is because I have studied this at some point. I know a little bit about the main line with bishop g5 and queen a5 check, a4 check, sorry. But I'm sure my opponent was going to know more than me in this position. And so I went for the sideline queen b3, which, to be honest, I did not know he was going to play the Rogozin. I didn't really prep this. I just knew that the move existed. My opponent responds with the best move, c5. I play bishop g5, knight c6, I take on d5, and here, this was a little sign of rustiness. And the reason why I actually played this tournament is because I just had nothing else to play in November. And if I don't play for a long time, I get rusty. I really need to play. And I wanted to just get some practice in, see what needs to be fixed, what needs to be improved, so that we can make this very, very big jump now that I'm going to play in December. So, queen takes d5. And the point here is that, although this is not disastrous for me by any means, I did not actually see this move coming. It was a surprise when it got played, and that's where I thought, God, I really need to lock in, because I can't be missing these kinds of moves. Here, because of the fact that the bishop is pinning the knight, which would, in theory, if otherwise be able to take the queen, I had to play queen takes b4. And after knight b4, knight takes d5, in this situation, it's just an equal endgame. Knight c2 is not possible, because I play king d2, remember I'm up a piece. And after knight takes a1, knight c7, I take on a8, and I'm up the piece, that bishop that I took originally. But my opponent could have played something like e takes d5, and we're going to reach an equal endgame, I guess, with just chances for both sides. But instead, I play the move bishop takes f6, which was a little bit of an inaccuracy, because now, after queen takes b3, ab3, gf6, we reached this endgame where I was feeling okay. I understood that I was slightly worse, but I was feeling okay because now we simply have a playable position that we can go on for many moves. It's imbalanced. Sorry about the birds that are singing outside my house, if the microphone is picking that up. I have these 2 doubled pawns. My opponent has 2 bishops. These pawns are slightly worse than these pawns, because they're isolated as well. And so I am slightly worse, but it's an imbalanced position, so it's time to play chess. Short castles, long castles, b6, bishop b5, knight f5, he attacks the pawn, we defend it. All of this logical moves, a6, I go back to d3. bishop to e4, and here my opponent plays a slight inaccuracy, which I was happy at this moment because I understood the evaluation, I understood what was going on, what he should have played, what I should have played, and after rook c8, this is not such a good move, because now I can take, go back to b8, and then to b1, sorry, if I ever have to protect the pawn, I can do it from a2, and I no longer have issues with the king and the knight, along with black's rook on the c file. So bishop b4, knight e4, he defends that pawn, but now I get some active counterplay with rook to d7, knight to c5, I take on c5, I play rook to d1, and here I understood that I had already equalized, maybe I'm slightly better even. Why? Because my rooks are very active on the d-file, and now this knight is going to start dancing around and give my opponent some problems. And rook c6. This was already a mistake. Under pressure, opponents can make mistakes. Can you find the move that gives me an advantage? If you want, you can pause the video. The move is pawn to b4. We're attacking this bishop. The bishop cannot go anywhere but take that pawn. But now we liberated this d4 square from the control of black's bishop, allowing us to jump in. Now my opponent only has one move, because this pawn is unprotected by the pawn, because it's also pinned. So my opponent has to play rook d6, but now I take, knight takes e6, and in this position we're going to win one of these two pawns. Rook b8, I collect that pawn, and eventually I go on to win this endgame without many problems. Rook e6 was played, maybe hoping for me to be scared of going into the pawn endgame because he has these two passed pawns. I took some time, I calculated, but then I took, and this endgame is just completely winning. Here my opponent resigned. So, the conclusions from the first game. I need to do a little bit, much better with my openings. I need to study them well. If I'm going to start playing new lines, I have to have them well studied. But other than that, I was happy with the way that I played once I got into an endgame. So a little bit of rustiness, we're shaking that off. I beat this 1800 rated opponent, and now it's time to move on to the next game. Here, I'm playing Bernardo Fabrega, another player who I know pretty well, rated 1900. He just dropped a little bit of rating, but he was very close to 2000, so undoubtedly a very good player as well. And we enter the Caro-Kann. An exchange variation, bishop d3, knight c6, c3, and I play e6. This little, not novelty, but slightly more rare move that I've seen by Badur Jobava. It was a little idea I had from some time ago, and this was actually annoying. No excuses whatsoever, simply a true comment. I wanted to review this line because I remember that my opponent plays the exchange, but those files were on my last computer that just died. I had to purchase a new laptop. I didn't find where I backed up the files, because I think I did. I should have it somewhere. And so I didn't manage to remember the nuances of the theory. All I could do was just play the moves that I remembered and that I understood from this position. Knight f3, bishop d6, knight e7. This is the whole idea of the line, to play something similar to what would it be? A Carlsbad, a Queen's Gambit for white, where you go for some ideas with f6 and e5 later on. And so that's why we can afford locking away our bishop on the c8 square. Rook e1, I castle. This is all still okay. My opponent plays b3, a typical move to then try to prepare c4 and put this bishop here. And here's where I start going wrong. Because although f6 is the main idea of this whole opening, to play e5, there are some nuances, and this doesn't work as well in this particular position. Why? Well, you'll see in a second. But I had to play the move knight to g6 to take control of the e5 square that way. And let's say if now my opponent continues with bishop b2, I simply continue developing with either b6, bishop b7, or I just play e5 immediately. So that's why we played knight g6, to prepare e5. But I cannot afford to play f6 and then e5 in this position. I did do that though. This gave my opponent the chance to play the best move in the position, c4. I play king to h8, also a typical move that I remembered. The point being that I want to play e5 at some point, which actually I could have done here. But I was worried about c takes d5, knight takes d5, and bishop c4. And indeed, I am slightly worse, but still better than I would have potentially been in the game. This knight actually, nothing happens to it. If he takes on e5, then I can just take with the bishop. I'm protecting the knight with the queen and with the bishop, and apparently I'm doing fine. But I played king h8, knight c3, and now I didn't understand exactly how I needed to continue. Because it's hard to come up with a move here. I cannot play e5, of course, because of this. Taking would be bad, because now b takes c4, e5. Here I had calculated the move d5, and these pawns are very, very strong for white. And so I played a6, which is okay. It's the third engine move. But what happened? I didn't remember the nuances and the correct ways to play in the opening. I went for an incorrect plan, and now I have already a slightly worse position here. My opponent plays a3, perfectly fine move to avoid something like knight b4. I played a6 to prevent things like knight b5 in the future, but honestly, it wasn't that urgent, and I couldn't really make anything work. And so again, I'm playing without a plan. I'm developing my bishop to d7, but it's really not doing much on d7. If anything, it's interfering on the d file for the queen. And I cannot come up with this plan of bishop e8, bishop g6 now, because the pawn on e6 is a weakness. My opponent plays bishop e2, very logical. And here, I could have continued with something like rook c8, but I got desperate. I took on c4. My opponent plays bishop c4, and here I made a mistake, a blunder, e5. And so that's what happens. When you're in a worse position, you don't completely understand, you make some wrong moves, you feel unpleasant, and you start collapsing. I played e5. My opponent plays knight e4, the best move. He actually played really, really well in this game. Obviously, it might have been different if I had gotten a good position where I was putting some pressure, but I didn't. Now I play bishop g4, and my opponent finds pawn takes e5, bishop takes e5, he trades queens on d8, and now I'm left with this weak pawn on e5, as well as with problems on the light squares after a move like knight g5, threatening these things, or knight c5, threatening this pawn on b7. Again, my opponent plays the best move, f3. I move my bishop back, knight c5. He's attacking this pawn. He's threatening to take on e6. I have this resource with b5. The bishop goes back, and I attack his knight, so at least I'm not getting forked. But now, simply b4, protecting that knight. I find the best move, bishop g6. The point is we need to defend this pawn urgently, because right now it's only defended by the knight and by the rook. And so I can take on g6, I have this knight protecting, but my opponent can simply take that pawn on a6. I play rook to d2, I get a little bit of counterplay, but it's not enough. My opponent collects this pawn on b5. And here, unfortunately, I didn't take a picture of the games. It was not DGT boards. This is what I remembered, because now I was in time trouble and we were all just playing some tricky blitz moves, and I actually got some good counterplay. It seemed to me I actually had chances, so I'll try to find the game and maybe if there's something interesting pointed out in the future, but I ended up losing this position. And so this is what I was talking about in terms of the tournament. Again, great tournament in terms of organization. It was very pleasant. But when you're outrating all of your opponents by 100, mostly 200-300 points, one of these things happens, which, again, full responsibility. Now I know what I need to improve. I need to study my lines better. I need to calculate better. We have a very good canvas to work on and prepare for the upcoming strong open tournaments. But now, how am I going to recover the 15 rating points that I just lost? I'm going to recover a little bit, but all I'm going to play now is lower rated opponents than me. And in another event, you can play some very strong player, and then you can recover. Here, I have no such opportunity. And you'll see in a second. I'm playing now with the white pieces in the next game against Teo Kushinakaho. Probably all of these players are underrated. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just not playing that well. But he played a very interesting game as well. This one is absolutely the sharpest game, most nervous I've ever been. And I go for the Jobava London. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I wanted something tactical. I wanted to secure the win. My opponent plays g6, e3. This is all theory so far. h4 threatening h5. My opponent prevents it by playing h5 himself. Knight f3, c5, knight e5. According to the engine, I'm slightly worse because this is a good line for black. In fact, he's playing all the correct moves again. Takes on d4, but this is still a playable position. I play queen d2. There's still many games that have been played here with mixed results. The evaluation doesn't really matter. It's just a crazy tactical position. My opponent plays queen a5, and I play f3, which is a slight inaccuracy. I was trying to prevent knight e4. Of course, in tactical games, it's more likely for these inaccuracies to occur. But the point is, this wasn't necessary. Queen b4 was more of a threat, it seems. I could have played something like short castles, maybe a3. But okay, I play f3, knight d7. My opponent is finding the best moves. The point is now he wants to activate this bishop and potentially get a breakthrough with e5. And my king is still in the center, and this bishop is going to be very, very strong. I take on c6. Pawn takes back on c6. This pawn on d4 is a little bit of a weakness. My opponent will now threaten to play c5 or e5, open everything up, and he's going to have slightly better piece coordination. And he's up in development. But I castle long. Why? Because my opponent was also threatening queen to b4 or queen to b6, attacking these two pawns. And so, castling long, although I knew it was very dangerous, putting my king in a dangerous situation along with his open b-file, I thought it was the best way to protect the pawn on b2 and the pawn on d4 at the same time. My opponent goes e5, best move in the position again. I play bishop h6, and here my opponent had to find the very strong move, pawn to c5. I was happy because I also saw this in the game, and the point here is that I cannot do something like taking on c5, because now d4 is coming in. Or I can, but this is already very bad. If I move the knight, then my opponent just takes on a2. And if I take the bishop, well, he can take back with the king, and I'm in the same exact problem. Knight e4, queen takes a2. And this is already very, very bad. Thankfully, my opponent played bishop to a6. And after bishop takes, queen takes, this is an absolutely insane position. I take on g7, king g7, I play g4. And I'm doing okay, objectively. I have the attack. My attack is faster than black's. But he plays knight to b6. And although the engine here says it's a blunder, I do not have an engine when I'm playing the game. And if my attack does not arrive in time, his attack is going to be deadly. He's threatening to go knight c4, with a tempo on the queen, by the way. Threaten checkmate with the queen. Something like queen b6. Come in with the rook. This is falling, everything's collapsing. And so my only hope is for my attack to arrive faster than his. I take on e5, which is actually okay. The engine says it's a mistake, but I'm still doing okay. And you know what? I found an idea to be able to defend in this position, and I think that's all that matters. Of course, I'll analyze this moment, I'll find the best move, but for now, I'm going to say that I'm still relatively happy with this move, because everything that came up, thankfully, I had calculated, but still very tricky. It looks so dangerous. Knight c4, queen d4, rook b8. He's threatening to take on b2. I cannot play pawn to b3 because then queen a3 is just checkmate. But I find e6 check. The king moves. If pawn takes... the pawn can't take in this position. If pawn f6, then I did see g f5. If rook takes b2, then I have, I believe, queen d3. Yes. And this arrives in time. If pawn takes, then I have rook g1 check. And the king is not escaping. Because here I have another quiet move, queen g6, and he's not in time to do anything on the queen side, and I'm just going to checkmate him. Instead, my opponent plays king h7, but now I have e7, a good move. Not sure why the engine says it's an accuracy. I did this on the phone, the computer analysis, now it's saying it's just as good. E7, rook g8, I bring my queen into f6, and my attack arrived faster than his. By very little, but it did. Rook takes b2, I take on f7, I promote to a queen, and then I deliver checkmate. After king h6, I'll take this rook, and it's GG's, game over. A very tactical game, very sharp, Not the way I usually like to play classical, but still, I still think this is good. I'm getting experience in many different kinds of positions. I'm preparing myself mentally. I'm finding holes in what I'm struggling in to then be able to transfer those lessons into the next big upcoming trips. Now, let's take a look at the next game, which was against 2000 rated candidate master Carlos Neira. And so if I win this game, then I have a chance to actually recover most of the rating that I lost in this Caro-Kann game. This is the second highest rated player in the tournament. I outrate him by 105 points, which is a pity because every game that I lose or every game that I draw is a huge blow, whereas the wins, they don't really help me recover. And so the only way to play in these tournaments is by just getting 5 out of 5 or 4.5 out of 5, which of course is realistic and is in theory what I should be doing, being the favorite. But these things, they unfortunately do happen, and again, I do take all the criticism, all the blame, all the responsibility. It is my fault what happened. But in another tournament, you can come back from these things because then you're going to get a 2100 or a 2200, and you can try to beat him, and in the long run, you're not always going to play the result that the rating indicates, right? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but on average, you should be playing according to your strength. On average, not in every game, right? And so in a tournament, I can lose to a 1900, beat a 2100, then I'm even at 2000 performance. Whereas here, I don't have the chance to do that. So that's all I'll say. Which is why I shouldn't really be playing these kinds of events. Many people have told me that, but you know what? I love to play chess. This is the classical tournament that I had, so I don't regret anything. I'm playing Carlos Neira, 2000 rated. I go for this Reti kind of setup, c4. But after bishop e7, I thought, you know what? Let's just transpose to the Catalan, play the Catalan. My opponent castles, I castle. He takes on c4, this is all the main line. And here he surprised me with this move, pawn to b6. The main move here is, of course, a6, a4, and there's a lot of theory here. b5 is another move, but b6 I was not very familiar with, especially considering I hadn't studied the Catalan in quite some while. But I decided to take on c4. The best way to go here was knight e5. But here I thought knight d5, rook d1, and okay, apparently this is slightly better for me than what I went for. To now take on c4 and misplace this knight on d5 seemingly. But I played queen takes c4 directly, bishop b7, knight c3. I'm playing all the good moves. Rook d1, very happy with this move. The point is I'm putting the rook on the d file, and it wouldn't be pleasant for my opponent to open up with c5. Which is why he plays queen to c8, but that's already a small inaccuracy. He should have played c5 anyway, although visually it doesn't look too nice. I was probably going to capture back, and in this position, play something like bishop g5. And because of the d file and the queen on d8 and this pin, maybe I have some activity, but it should just all even out at the end and be equal. But bishop c5, bishop g5, this was not what happened. My opponent played queen c8. I play bishop g5, h6. I trade on f6, which was the correct idea, because even though I'm giving up the bishop pair, now in this position, I just have more activity and more space. I play rook c1, and this bishop wasn't really going to do anything on any other square anyway. And so I have these two rooks in the center, my pieces are all active. Slightly better Catalan position. What can I really say? c5. D takes c5, and here, ladies and gentlemen, I was very proud of myself because I understood that bishop c5 was good and queen c5 was bad. And I understood this because I calculated what ended up happening, and my opponent did indeed play queen c5. And so these are the moments where I feel like I'm pretty good at these moments of, you know, these little inaccuracies, finding them, capitalizing on them. But then I struggle in other things like openings and calculation and even some endgames. So it's good. Again, I'm seeing my strengths and weaknesses. All of this to say, what's the move here for white? If you want, you can pause the video. It's not a crazy tactic, but it is a sequence that gives us a nice advantage. Well, the move is queen takes c5. We just trade those queens. And my opponent here thought that he had just equalized completely into this endgame. But what he did not realize, and what I did find, was this move knight to a4 in this position. And now the point is, where can the bishop go? If the bishop goes back to e7, I have rook c7 with this fork. He has to take on f3, bishop f3, but now this I calculated. Rook f to d8, the only move apparently. And here I'm better, of course, because I can just take this pawn. Sorry, I can play rook b7. And the activity that I have, this rook, this bishop, everything, this pawn hanging, this pawn can't move. Black is very much tied down. So what else? If you play something like bishop to b4, then I have a3 with the same things coming in. This not being possible because of pawn to b4. And so my opponent goes for bishop takes f3. Bishop takes f3, rook c8, the best response actually. But now I have knight takes c5, and I reach this more pleasant endgame because my bishop is slightly stronger than the knight, and black has these weaknesses with the pawns. Here I played e3, simply trying to continue my development, a call move. Rook b8, b3, king f8, rook d6. Good move again. I'm threatening rook c6. I'm threatening rook a6 potentially as well. But my opponent finds rook to c7, rook to c8, sorry, and the point is that after rook a6, he has rook c7, protecting everything. What I didn't realize, though, is this is what I should actually go for, because now I just continue with king f1, and black is tied down to the protection of these squares. Knight d5, I can take on d5, and I misevaluated this resulting rook endgame, failing to understand that because of the pawn structure, it's better for me. The engine gives here +1. But we enter this endgame, which is just equal. I thought that trading rooks gives me the benefit of playing with the bishop against the knight, having a good chances here, and actually did manage to create something. But again, I apologize for the fact that I did not remember everything now, because again, we're in time trouble and we're just making moves. I didn't take a picture of the score sheet. There was no DGT boards. So all I'll say is I put some more pressure, but my opponent defended well, and he made a draw. And you see what's funny? I lost more rating with this draw than what I won winning my last game, where I won 1.8 rating points. Here I lost 2.2. But okay, what to do? I'm still getting good experience. It's the 5th final game of the tournament. We play a Caro-Kann. I'm playing a 1756. Also a talented player. He had some good results in this event, beating some other strong players. But he did not manage to get such a good position in this game. Bishop e3, I knew this line of the advanced Caro-Kann. Knight d7, bishop b5. I knew that knight e7, here's the best move. We're threatening to now go knight f5, take this bishop. Some themes with queen a5 check coming up next. This is very comfortable. f4 already an inaccuracy, knight f5. And here I managed to win back this pawn on c5 with excellent piece placement. Here I play queen b4. These pawns are being attacked. Queen d2. I play rook c8. So again, maybe slightly too slow. Trying to be too perfect, where I should have just calculated takes. Rook b1, queen a3. And if rook b7 in this position, rook c8 now. And this is very good. Point is, the knight cannot really move anywhere. And if rook b3, then just queen c5. And I'm not down a pawn. I just have a better structure and still excellent piece placement. Instead, I played rook c8 directly. Still okay. My opponent plays rook b1. Now I play bishop b5. I want to not let him castle his king. Knight b5, queen b5, queen d3. The final mistake. I can probably even... Well, taking wouldn't make much sense, because here I'm not up a pawn. I'm still better because I can play rook c2. But I find the best move, queen b4. Here I could have played knight e3, just crushing. Again, these moments that I'm missing, I'm going to really hammer the tactics to not make these kinds of mistakes. But I entered this endgame, and let's just say I won without that many issues. So, what are the conclusions? Oops, that's my what's up. Sorry about that. The conclusions of this event are that I need to improve my openings, still improve my calculation. I was a little bit rusty. Unfortunately, I dropped 11 rating points with this experience, putting me back at 2098 or 97, which is not a big deal, of course. We have 2 strong tournaments coming up, so I'm going to hopefully recover most of it. But now it's a matter of it not looking so pretty, right? 2100 looks better than 2098. But it doesn't really matter. That's only going to be 1 month because hopefully we're going to do very well in the international tournaments. I'm going to bring you all along the journey. I'm going to make some higher quality vlogs. I have the microphone now, the camera. And so I hope you enjoyed this. You found it useful to you. I'll keep working very hard. More videos coming up very soon. And that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for your support. You can consider subscribing if you enjoyed this. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.